So this video is based on you using a Mac, in which case you would Google for and download Mamp, but if you're working on a Windows machine then you'd want to Google for XAMPP or WAMP. Pretty much everything then from here on in is similar on either operating system once you've installed it. So you're installing Mamp, you would download Mamp and Mamp Pro. Basically they're the same two bits of software in one download. The difference between the two is just whether you have a license key or not. I've already installed that, so I don't need to download it, and you'll see that I've got Mamp in my applications folder as well as a bunch of other folders. So I find the Mamp program and application, open it, and then start the servers. And when I start the servers, you'll see the little green lights in the top right hand corner of that application come on, and this tells you there's an update. I'm going to ignore that, which basically shows that MySQL and Apache are running. So if you remember that, the A being the A in Mamp, and the MySQL being the second M in AMP, with the first M being for Mac, and the P referring to PHP. So the Mamp start page then will show you what the MySQL details are, and these are important for when you install WordPress. So the first thing you need to do before you install WordPress is go to phpMyAdmin, which is a database management tool, and that installs some basic databases out of the box. I've got a few others in there that I've already installed, and first of all I need to create a database and remember the name of that database. So I go to create a database, type the name in, click on the create button, and that's all I need to do there for the moment. Right, so now I'm going to go to wordpress.org, and I'm going to download the latest version of WordPress. So the reason that I'm doing this rather than use wordpress.com is I think that you'll find that most of the help content that you can get for WordPress is based around the open source wordpress.org, so you'll be able to read between the lines much easier in terms of being able to kind of decipher some of that help content. And obviously once you've got WordPress installed, even though you're running it locally, you'll be able to kind of download themes and plugins as you need. So it downloads as a zip file, you expand that zip file, and that will open that up into a WordPress folder. So what you'll see here is I already have a website running on WAMP, and you can see that the default web address of that website is localhost:88888. So that is the equivalent of my domain name when it's running locally. So what Mamp is doing is looking for the contents of the htdocs directory, which you'll find in the folder in which you've installed Mamp. So there you can see my htdocs folder. So if I want to now get a new site up and running in Mamp, all I need to do is rename that htdocs folder to something like htdocs.old, and then create myself a new htdocs folder. And then what you'll find is that when I refresh that localhost:88888 on my browser, you'll see that there'll be nothing there because there's nothing now in the htdocs document. So I'm going to demonstrate that here. So I click refresh and nothing appears. So now what I want to do is copy the contents of the WordPress folder that I've just downloaded into that htdocs location. So I open up htdocs, I'll go to the WordPress folder, I open up that WordPress folder, and I select everything within that folder, and then I'm going to copy that over to htdocs. So in general, when you go to any web address, what it's looking for is a file called index.something, so index.php or index.html, for example. So you'll see that in the htdocs folder now. So when I refresh that, it's looking for index.php, and because this is the first time that it's gone to WordPress, that index.php is going to aim to direct me to install WordPress, which I do by selecting my language. And then thereafter, this is where I need the database details that I had in Mamp in the first instance. So I go back to my Mamp homepage, my Mamp config page, just remind myself of what I called my database, and then look at the host name and the username and the pass name. Now they're both very insecure username and username and passwords rather. So if you put this site live, you would never go live with a username and password of root. So you would need to change that at the go live point. But for now, while you're running it on your local machine and just evaluating WordPress, then it's fine to leave it as it is. So I can now continue and go and install the rest of WordPress. So I put in the name of my database, and I will change my username and password to root. Table prefix of WP, I'm just going to leave that as it is. That's the prefix that it will put in front of all of the tables that make up that database. And then I can go ahead and install WordPress. So I choose a title for my site. Most of this information you can change down the line. I'm going to give myself a username of Alec and a password of Alec, just because I'm evaluating it at the moment. So confirm use of that shamefully weak password. And then install WordPress. And there we are, that is all done. So now go to the login page. I can log in with Alec and Alec. And here I am logged into WordPress. So if I now go back to phpMyAdmin and refresh that database page, you'll now see that it fills up with a whole bunch of tables that are each prefixed with that WP underscore that we had in the setup window. And then if I click on one of those tables, you can see that my user login there is Alec, and you can see my password. Now my password isn't stored there as Alec, it's actually stored as an encrypted version of my password, so that if my database were hacked, then at least my password is encrypted. So that should just give you some idea of how any content that is created in WordPress, be it a post, a user, a comment or whatever, ends up getting written into a relevant table within the database. So you can see some of those database tables here. Not that you ever need to dig into phpMyAdmin to use them or edit them, but it just gives you some idea of how it works. So if I click on WP Posts, for example, you will see that within that there are all of the there's a record for each of the posts that WordPress installs by default. And so thereafter, you're on your own with WordPress development. You can go in and start to download themes, download and configure plugins, build out the content and structure of your site, and see how you get on. So just a couple of tips with if you're to install plugins. The way to do that is you can go and search for the particular plugins that you're looking for by clicking on the Add New button and then search for those. And what you want to do, I would suggest, is look for plugins that have been tested with your version of WordPress, that have been used multiple times, so that you know that you're using code which is well supported and reliable, that potentially has most of the functionality you need that can be done for free without necessarily having to buy a premium subscription to it, and also one that will support shortcodes. And I can send you the link to another video where I show how I've used shortcodes in another website that I've built, and what the advantage of using those are. And while you can install most of the plugins and themes that you might want to use straight from the WordPress interface, it's also possible to upload your plugins that you might find elsewhere or themes that you might find elsewhere as zip files, or you can FTP them into your relevant folder in the themes directory. Just one other little tip as well in terms of where you might go wrong with using Mamp is that you might forget to turn it on. So you get so excited about going in and building the next part of your website that you go straight to your browser and that you go to localhost, and then you find that it tells you that the site can't be reached. And that is simply because you either haven't opened Mamp or you actually haven't started the servers from running. So that's a process that you need to remember to do as well. While the majority of the changes that you're making to your content are all stored in the database, as you add plugins and themes, you'll see that they start to get added to the themes and plugins folder where your files live in htdocs. So if you were to upload your own theme or plugins, or you ended up having to FTP them anywhere, that would be where you would be putting that content. So when we eventually get to the point of putting our site live, we would need to FTP all of those files across to our web space, and then also install our database using something like PHP admin on cPanel with the web hosting that we buy. And the other thing as well is to make sure that while you're developing locally, that you regularly back up your files and your database, because obviously if you lose the data on your machine, then you lose everything if you're not running backup. So I would make sure that you are doing that as well. And at some point in the not too distant future, I'll try and do a video that shows how you can move this site over onto your web space.